Okay, we have another week of fun prepositions. So, just to remind us what a preposition is, um, I want to be honest. Every time I teach prepositions, I have to go through hours of trying to figure out what they are again. So, I was really committed this time to figuring it out for good. So, here's the thing: there's lots of different prepositions, right? But they're only prepositions sometimes. You know how some words can be sometimes like a noun and sometimes a verb, sometimes an adjective. What would be an example? Like the word can, right? Um, it's a it's a noun when you're talking about like a can of Diet Coke, right? But it's a verb when you're talking about I can do something. Weird, right? So prepositions are like that too. So when I'm trying to think of all these examples, I'm trying to think of how do I know that this is an example of the word being used as a preposition as opposed to like an adverb? Because a lot of times prepositions and adverbs, they can be kind of confusing as to which is which. Now, you don't need to know this. You don't need to know the difference between a preposition and adverb necessarily right now in your life. But I just wanted to tell you that uh, it's even tricky for me. And I feel like I'm a pretty intelligent 38-year-old woman, so go figure, right? Anyways, the best way I could figure out after all of my reading and researching and practicing, and I even had a discussion with my husband about it. The best thing I could think of is to say that prepositions show relationships. They show how a noun or a pronoun is related to another word or group of words in a sentence. So they show a relationship. They give you more information about the subject, which is the noun or the pronoun in the sentence. Okay. Now, here's the thing that kind of helped me is that this relationship, the connection between them, or the extra information, usually, and not always, so darn it, this isn't going to work 100% of the time, but it usually has to do with how the noun is related to other parts in time or space. So that means like when and where. So that's kind of what I am using as I explain is prepositions will tell you when and where a noun occurs. Okay. So let's see. We've got some prepositions today that we're going to talk about. Instead of doing the videos for each preposition each day, I'm going to go through the prepositions for the week right now. Number one, because that's a lot of videos. And number two, because I think it's good to remind ourselves because some of these are going to overlap a little bit. Okay. So the first group of prepositions we have, or the first preposition I have is by. So when I talk about time and space, by plus a time expression can be used to show when something must happen. So it's like kind of like a command. So if I am at a hotel and the sign says guests must check out by 11 a.m. So by this time, I need to be checked out. I'm a guest. So this is the noun in the sentence, the main subject, and this is when I need to check out by. Please send payment by Thursday. So this is like a second person kind of sentence. It's a command. So by this time, I am being instructed to send payment. Um, and then doing something alone. I like reading by myself, or let's do something by ourselves. So this has to do with like space, like who's around me. No one, I'm alone. So more about by. So by can also mean near, next to, close to, or on the side of. So I think this is the most popular way we use by. So like the house is by a river. That's a space. Where is the house, right? David lives by the school. By can also be a method of transportation. Sarah went to Sacramento by train. I go to work by car. It also can be a method of communication. I spoke to her by telephone. Please respond by email. Now, these two don't really have to do with time and space. They have to do with method, right? So it says method, method. So occasionally we get that involved, and I'm pretty sure that's a preposition, but I'm telling you, I had nightmares about preposition trying to figure this out. And then another method, a method of payment, but not cash. So method of payment means like how you pay for something, but you don't use, like if you're paying by cash money, you can't use by. You use in instead. Like, right? So anyways, if I'm paying by check or credit card, can I pay by check? I paid for the computer by credit cards. So I would use by for those two, but not cash. Okay. And then finally, we can explain who's doing an action. The kitchen was cleaned by Dad. So again, not necessarily a time and space situation. So like I said, it doesn't always work, but it works most of the time. The concern was, I think that's supposed to say concert. That's a typo. The concert was organized by the school. Our next preposition is like. Like is, you got to be careful because like is a verb, right? Like if I say, I like ice cream, that's a verb, not a preposition. So if I want to use like a preposition, I use it when I'm showing that something is similar to something else. So you look like your mother. Now I'm using it like a preposition because I'm connecting you and your mother. So I'm showing the relationship between those two parts of the sentence. Her dress looks just like mine. Again, I'm showing a relationship between her dress and my dress by using that preposition like. Her eyes sparkled like diamonds. Now, I had kind of a trouble with this. I'm like, this is a simile, right? Is it being used as a preposition? Actually, I think no. I meant to cross this out, but you know how it's being used? It's being used as an adverb in this sentence, not a preposition. How do I know? Because diamonds is explaining the sparkle. It's explaining a verb. So when something explains a verb, it's an adverb. Prepositions are only used to connect nouns. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Let's go to as, shall we? So as, we'll use it when we refer to the function or character that someone or something has. Like what? Let's look at an example. So he works as a waiter. So that's his function. Function's kind of like his job or what he does. So his job, his function is a waiter. It came as a shock. So again, that's kind of like the character. So whatever it is, the news maybe, the news came as a shock. So the character of that news was shocking. Let's go. Oh, good. Time and space, finally. So we could talk about during the time of being a noun. He had often been sick as a child. So during the time of being a child, he was often sick. That's kind of how we make that link. As is also similar to, and we know that kind of like it's when we use a simile, we use like and as. Sorry, my daughter is printing something. Interrupting my video. So similar to, but again, we got to be careful because as it's used in a simile, it's not a preposition. But we can say something like this: they all rose as one. So everyone stood up at the same time. They all rose as one. His face was as a mask which revealed nothing. So that's a weird sentence, but that's the proper use of a preposition as. It's saying his face, it was similar to a mask because it showed no emotion. Our next preposition is between. So between is going to be used when we are talking about where it exists in space in the middle of. He stood between his mother and father. So that tells me he and where his position is in space. The ball rolled between the desk and the wall. Again, it tells me where the ball is, excuse me, in space between the desk and the wall. Oh my gosh, that was between. I love you, between. That was so easy. Okay, beyond. Again, beyond is like space too, but it can also be time. So time and space, right? Prepositions. That's kind of what we think about. Doing something at the same time or in the same place. Oh my gosh. Abort. I did not fix this one. Okay, so I am going to try to edit this part out where I messed up. If I fail at my editing, because I really don't want to start this whole video over, just pretend like that never happened because I accidentally put the wrong examples in my beyond slide. Anyways, for real this time, beyond. Beyond is a word we use when we want to show that something is further than, at a greater distance than. So when we talk about where it exists in space, it's further down than something else. That's the relationship to the second part of our sentence. His house is beyond the old oak tree. So I'm comparing or showing the relationship between his house and the old oak tree, and I'm saying it's beyond. I wonder what exists beyond the horizon. In addition to more than. So when we talk about beyond, we could it could be something, an increased number. She completed the work beyond what was required of her. So we're kind of showing the relationship between her work and the requirements of the assignment, and she did something beyond that. And then out of reach. So if something's out of reach, we could use the preposition beyond to make that relationship between the two. So the math problem, that's the first thing we're talking about, right? We're comparing that to my abilities, and we're saying it's beyond my abilities. It's out of reach of my abilities. I don't know how to do it. I've never been taught, kind of something like that. Or finally, and you knew there had to be one of these. There had to. Mrs. Hanko's beauty is beyond measure. So my beauty and the ability to measure something, it's beyond. The relationship is you can't do it. It's out of reach. You know I couldn't get through this without at least slipping one of these in, right? Okay. All right, next one. Hopefully I didn't mess this one up. Into. Let's look at the preposition into. So we could use into to describe the relationship in space between two things, to say that one is in the direction of the other. So do not look directly into the sun. You and the sun, don't look into it. You could also show entry or insertion. So this is kind of like the main into, like I put the gift into a box. So I entered it into the box, or I inserted it into the box. She poured juice into a cup. Okay. They walked into the house. So we could be like putting items into something else, or we could be like physically a person going into something, right? So if we have two nouns and we're showing the relationship, and one is going into or entering the other, then that's when we use that preposition. If we are talking about moving something in a position of contact with, so this is like a space one, right? So if I would run into a wall, that's my the relationship between me and the wall is I made contact with it, right? Smacked into it. Or into could also be a period of time. She worked late into the night. So the relationship between me and the night is I'm working late into it. Next preposition, through. Through indicates going into one side and out another. So I think we know that, right? So Dad hammered a nail through the board. So in one side of the board, out the other side. It could also mean by way of. She left through the back door. So it's showing the relationship between her and the back door as she went through it. Passage from one place to another. The highway ran through the desert. So the relationship between the highway and the desert, the highway didn't go around the desert, it went right through it. Without stopping for. I accidentally drove through a red light. So I'm giving the comparison between me and this red light, and I went through it. Ruh-roh. During an entire period of time, so there's a time one, she had been afraid of spiders all through her life. So her entire life, she was afraid of spiders. Okay, to is like a seriously big preposition, and I was like, I am not going to put all the twos on here. So I kind of picked like some main ones, okay? But to is probably like one of those words where when you see it, it's a preposition. So movement towards a person, place, or thing. I drove to the city. We went to lunch. Give your homework to your teacher. So I tried to do here's a place, movement towards the city, movement towards a thing, lunch, movement towards a person, your teacher. To can also be a direction. Like he sat with his back to the door. So that tells me kind of like if I'm trying to picture where he's sitting, I can see the door, I can see his back to it. It helps me with figuring out direction. Also, we could use direction like the directions we see on a map, north, south, east, west. So the birds migrated to the south. The result of an action. So what do I mean? I mean like the vase was broken all to pieces. And position and time. It is 10 minutes to 5 o'clock. So 2 can be like it's really, really close, or it could be 5 hours to 5 o'clock, right? So I guess it doesn't have to be close, but we could kind of pick a period of time and then show the relationship. The first part of the sentence was show how far away we are from that time, right? So that shows that relationship. All my work is done up to Thursday. So again, we chose Thursday as the period of time we are comparing it to. So my work up to Thursday. Over. So we know over means to indicate a position higher than or above, right? So the ducks flew over the lake. They're higher than the lake. And he threw the covers over his head. So on top of, above, right? Over can also mean having a higher authority or ranking. So the home team could have a big lead over the visitors. So I'm comparing the relationship between the home team and the visiting team. And we're using over to show that they are winning, right? He respected the people working over him. So someone could be working over you. They're like your boss, right? Shows kind of like in space, like where they exist in the terms of like who's in charge of who and all that. More than. Does it cost over $5? So I'm kind of comparing like the cost of this item and $5. And if it's over, it's more than, right? She ran the mile in over 12 minutes. It's kind of weak sauce, right? Toward. I think we have a couple more. We're almost done. Hang in there. Toward is in the direction of. He kicked the ball toward the goal. So this is like a space issue. Like, where did the ball go? Toward the goal. Last time I saw her, she was heading toward town. So I'm showing the relationship between her and town. Toward can also be not long before. Like he finished his homework toward the end of the afternoon. It's not long before the end of the afternoon he was done. Toward can mean leading to or in relation to. So he had earned several credits toward his college degree. So if I'm working up to something, I can make progress towards that goal. The money they raised went toward new books for the library. So again, I have this goal to raise money for new books in the library. So this money is making me move towards that, or it's leading me towards reaching that goal. Oh my gosh, that's it. We're done. Yeah. So those are the prepositions you're going to work with this week. Last week we worked with prepositions as well. The main thing you need to know about prepositions is just like where to use them correctly. Like when you write a sentence and you're trying to figure out how to add more description, prepositions do a great job with that, right? So if we look at some of the words or sentences on here, it's like, what if I just said he kicked the ball? So we've been working a lot with adding detail to our sentences. So I could add this preposition toward and then finish that sentence with the goal, and that makes it a little bit more descriptive, right? So a lot of prepositions is showing relationships between subjects or nouns and adding more details to help me understand a little bit more. So we are going to continue working with prepositions next week as well, but not so much in like learning what each preposition means, more like this idea of using prepositions to show details in our writing. And that's what we want to focus on, not so much memorizing a big list of prepositions, even though I did have to do that in high school and it was horrible. But in fourth grade, we're just trying to be better writers. And one part of being a better writer is lots and lots of details and description, right? So this is kind of why we're talking about prepositions, also because the state of California said we have to. But it's, the more you know, power, right? Okay. So this week's quill lessons, get them done. Hopefully you're finding that they're getting easier and easier with time. And I really appreciate all your guys' hard work. So keep it awkward.